In this last video for Module 4 Unit 1, let us talk about the adjustment of the economy from the unstable or temporary short-run equilibrium to the stable or the permanent long-run equilibrium. So how does the economy really move from a situation like SRE1 to the vertical line or a situation like SRE2 to the vertical line? That is what we are going to see. Now if you remember, I already told you that whenever the economy is in an unstable short-run equilibrium, that means whenever there is an output gap, something like a recessionary gap here or an inflationary gap there, the objective of the economy is to converge towards that vertical line, and that convergence happens through the positive or the negative demand or supply shocks to the economy. Now, the supply adjustment of the economy, the movement of the supply curves, the shift of the supply curves happens very spontaneously or organically in the economy without any change in policy. The supply shock happens in the economy very organically or spontaneously through the wage adjustment process. So today in this video we are basically talking about the wage adjustment process, and this wage adjustment process really moves the economy from the short run to the long run equilibrium very spontaneously over time without any initiative from the government. So let's say the economy is at a point like A, that is, it is at a short run equilibrium 1 such that the actual real GDP is Y1, which is less than the potential, so the economy is at a recessionary gap. Now that means there is unemployment in the economy. Whenever there is unemployment in the economy, it means there are a lot of people waiting in queues to take up jobs, but the number of jobs is less in the economy. So if you have a situation like that, you really would see there would be a decrease in wages in the economy. The wages would go down in the economy, where W is the wage, right? So W goes down. Wage is denoted by W, capital W, okay? So if W goes down, the wage rate goes down, you know that the cost of production goes down, and we have covered this in an earlier video where we talked about the short run aggregate supply shifters. So as wage rate goes down, the cost of production goes down and the short run aggregate supply goes up. So there would be a right shift of this short run aggregate supply SRAS1, and that right shift would continue until the short run aggregate supply SRAS1 reaches a level like that. Let's call that SRAS1 dash. So there's a right shift of that curve, and you can see that a new long run equilibrium is established here, LRE1, which is on the vertical line. And please note, at LRE1 the output gap has been removed because your real GDP has come to the potential. So the unemployment has been removed in the economy, but at the same time there has also been a decrease in the price index of the economy. Let's call that P1 dash. There is deflation in the economy, but the economy has experienced an increase in the real GDP, so that the real GDP has gone up from Y1 to YP. The output gap has been removed, the recessionary gap is removed. So the objective of the country has been met, and as a secondary consequence there has been deflation in the economy, right? Now what happens if the economy instead was on the right hand side? If it was at a point like SRE2, let's call that point B. If it was at a point like point B, then what would you see in the economy? If there is an inflationary gap such that your actual real GDP Y2 is greater than the potential, what does that mean? That means that there is negative unemployment rate. In other words, everyone willing and able to work has multiple jobs available. So they would take up the job that offers them the highest wages. So in a situation like that, the wage rate would actually go up because you would do the job that offers you higher wages. And as the wage rate goes up, the cost of production goes up, so the short run aggregate supply goes down. So the economy would experience a leftward shift of this short run aggregate supply, and that shift would continue. The shift of the short run aggregate supply would continue until it reaches a point like this, right? It reaches somewhere like that. So it is this curve that is shifting. Let me call that SRAS2 dash. So it's this curve that is shifting leftward. Okay, and a new equilibrium is established at that point. So it's the intersection of SRAS2 dash, AD2 and LRAS. So this is your stable long run equilibrium LRE, and please note that at this equilibrium there has been there is no longer an output gap. The real GDP has come to the potential, so the output gap has been removed, but it has come with a secondary consequence of increase in the price index. Let's call that P2 dash. So there is inflation in the economy, but the output gap in the economy has been removed. So you can see that this is a spontaneous process of adjustment. The government has not done this. The government has not initiated the process, but just because there was output gap in the economy, there was recessionary gap or inflationary gap, there was either positive unemployment or negative unemployment. As a result of that, the wage adjustments process starts. Either the wage rate goes down or the wage rate goes up, so that the short run aggregate supply either shifts to the right or the short run aggregate supply shifts to the left, so that the real GDP comes to the potential and there is deflation or inflation created in the economy. So the wage adjustment process is an organic spontaneous process in the economy that corrects any kind of output gap in the economy. It takes the real GDP to the potential, but it also causes inflation or deflation in the economy. So with this, we have come to the end of module 4 unit 1. In unit 2, we are specifically going to talk about macroeconomic policy. Now remember, the objective of those macroeconomic policies, fiscal or monetary, is still going to be removing this recessionary or inflationary gap, but those policies usually work through the demand route in correcting the economy.